The third week of testimony picked right up where the second week left off, with DNA analyst Sherry Culhane with the State Crime Lab.
Not only were you involved in the 2003 exoneration of Mr. Avery, but you were also involved in the 1985 conviction of Mr. Avery, weren't you?
I worked evidence on that case, yes.
And you testified as a witness for the prosecution at trial in that case, didn't you?
Yes, I testified.
Defense attorney Jerome Buting had pointed questions about the treatment of DNA samples before and after they reached the crime lab.
But what you're not saying is anything about how his DNA found its way inside the RAV4, are you?
No.
Your tests aren't designed to tell us how his DNA found its way into the location where you ultimately swabbed, are they?
No.
What you're looking for is a DNA profile, and if you find it, then you compare it to a known reference sample, in this case, Mr. Avery, right?
Correct.
But if someone else planted Mr. Avery's DNA or blood, or both, inside that vehicle, you wouldn't know that from these tests, would you?
No.
And Buting continued to pursue the defense's theory of a botched investigation, focusing this time on Culhane's inadvertent contamination of a control sample used in the analysis of Teresa Halbach's DNA extracted from a bullet fragment found in Stephen Avery's garage.
Because you used up all of the sample, not only could you not re-extract it, the defense had no opportunity to retest that, did we?
You didn't have any opportunity to test the original item, but my extracts are available for retesting.
Did you retest them?
No,
Why not?
because my results from my quantitation showed that there was DNA in the manipulation control.
You're telling
I would have gotten
me-
the same thing.
You're telling me that you get a test that required that you go to so far as to deviate from the protocol when you could have simply retested the same extract
There was nothing different about it. Retesting it would not have changed anything
because it was contaminated already.
because the DNA was introduced during the extraction process,
Because
I
it was,
believe.
that's right. Therefore, the extract was contaminated already. Isn't that right?
The control was contaminated with my DNA, not the extract.
From there, Buting assailed what he felt was a growing pattern of mistakes in crime lab analyses.
So you count 7 out of 50.
Yes,
I counted 8, but maybe I miscounted. You said there's about 10 analysts,
anywhere from 10 to 12.
okay? So if there's 50 errors, the average, if it's spread evenly, should be 5 errors a person, right?
That depends on how many cases each analyst works.
That's true. You, though, have 7 out of 50, which is more than the average if you divide it evenly, correct?
But not all those analysts work the same number of cases.
The defense and prosecution went back and forth with more and more questions for Culhane, leading Judge Patrick Willis to eventually step in.
The court's going to sustain the objection, and we're just plowing over the same ground here, so I'm going to excuse the witness at this time.
The day concluded with the direct examination of State Crime Lab forensic scientist Nick Stalkey.
And what involvement did you have with the examination of this RAV4?
I was asked to analyze the bloodstain patterns that may have been present in this vehicle.
After the jury was excused for the day, the prosecution made a motion for disclosure after the defense suddenly theorized that buccal swabs of Avery's mouth used to exonerate him in 2003 could have also been used here to set him up.
We would renew our Richardson motion for disclosure and evidence if there was to be any more frame-up allegations, or should we say wild speculation.
Judge Patrick Willis granted this motion, but in the post-trial press conference, defense attorney Buting resumed his pointed criticism of Sherry Culhane.
This crime lab is obviously overworked. Sherry Culhane is either an incompetent leader or she's overworked if she's making that many mistakes trying to train all these people. It's shocking. 89 times, at least, that we know of. And remember, those are only when you have the controls contaminated. You don't know how many other mistakes are never recorded and never detected because they involve the evidence itself. And, you know, it's like if you open up a microwave dinner and you see a fly in the little peach cobbler, are you going to eat the Salisbury steak? I hope not. Most of us aren't. You know, you find contamination in one area, you're going to find it in the entire test. And that's why the protocol says throw it out. Throw it out. And in her entire career, this is the only time she's ever not done that? Come on.
Recapping day 11 of the Stephen Avery trial. Tuesday began where Monday ended as the defense cross-examined State Crime Lab forensic scientist Nick Stalkey about his analysis of bloodstains in Teresa Halbach's car.
You take precautions to try to reduce the risk that you would accidentally, unintentionally contaminate the surface or the object, the area you're examining.
Our goal is not to contaminate the scene. No.
The state then called Blaine Dassey, whose younger brother Brendan is charged along with their uncle Stephen Avery in the Halbach murder.
How old are you, Blaine?
18.
Did you go to school?
Yes.
On the day Halbach disappeared, Halloween of 2005, Blaine says he saw his uncle Stephen put a white paper bag in a burn barrel near his trailer.
Approaching your house as you got off the bus, and you said you were walking down toward your house, did you see anything as you were walking towards your house?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury what you saw, please?
I seen Stephen Avery bringing a plastic bag to the burning barrel.
What burn barrel are you talking about?
The burning barrel.
Whose burn barrel?
Stevens.
Investigators later found fragments of Teresa Halbach's cell phone and camera in that burn barrel. On Halloween night of 2005, Blaine went trick-or-treating, and when he came back,
I seen Stephen Avery sitting there watching the fire.
Watching what?
Watching the fire. The bonfire.
There was a bonfire at your Uncle Steve's?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury where that bonfire was, please?
Behind the garage.
but on cross-examination, the defense asked him,
Did you hear any woman, any young woman's voice screaming for her life?
No.
Did you hear any gunshots?
No.
If you had heard gunshots or someone screaming for their life, that's something you would remember.
Yes.
And defense attorney Dean Strang reminded Blaine of an encounter he had with law enforcement in the days following Halbach's disappearance.
There come a time in that discussion between you and your mom and the agents when the agents sort of got in your face a little bit?
Yes.
What were they doing to get in your face?
They were arguing.
They were arguing.
Yes.
They raised their voices.
Yes.
They got angry.
Yes.
They accused you guys of not accepting that Steve was guilty, didn't they?
Yes.
They accused you of embarrassing yourselves by believing in your uncle, didn't they?
Yes.
They tried to convince you that Stephen Avery was guilty, didn't they?
Yes.
Blaine's testimony about seeing a bonfire near Avery's trailer was corroborated by Robert Fabian, who was hunting rabbits with Stephen Avery's brother Earl that day.
Tell the jury what you remember about that burn barrel at about 5:20 p.m. on the 31st of October.
When me and Earl had pulled up on the golf cart, we had stopped in between the house and the garage, and the smoke from the burn barrel was blowing right in my face, so I had told Earl to move ahead.
Scott Todick, Blaine's stepfather, who was dating his mother Barb Yonda at the time, also testified to seeing the bonfire.
Saw a big fire.
And can you tell the jury where you saw the fire, please?
Right there.
You're pointing to an area just south of the garage known as the Stephen Avery Garage, is that
Yep.
right? Could you describe that fire for us, Mr. Tadic?
It was a big fire. It was bigger than normal.
And how did Todick know what time it was?
Because I wanted to go home and watch a TV show.
What show do you want to go watch?
It was Prison Break, actually.
The state then turned its attention to Teresa Halbach's cell phone records and called two Cellcom employees, Laura Chaudry and Bobby Dorwart.
Are you able to tell who that telephone call was made to?
To Teresa Halbach.
What was the duration of that call?
7 seconds.
And on two of those calls, the caller used the star 67 feature, which blocks the phone number on caller ID services. Recapping day 12 of the Stephen Avery trial, Dan O'Donnell, News. The 13th day of testimony focused on bone fragments found in a burn pit near Stephen Avery's trailer, fragments found by State Department of Justice Special Agent Tom Sturdivant.
Deputy Yost was standing in front of what appeared to be, in my opinion, a piece of bone fragment. It's approximately 1 inch in length, and my opinion was, and I think we kind of agreed, that it was a piece of bone fragment. And after looking at that I looked at this so-called burn pit at the end of that pile of gravel and also noticed other, what in my opinion were bone fragments that were obvious around that pile of debris.
Sturtevant said the investigation was hampered a bit by
a large, in my opinion, intimidating big German shepherd that stood on top of that pile.
Those bone fragments contained fragments of the victim's teeth, which forensic dentist Donald Simley said were horribly burned.
I've been doing this work since 1981, and I mean, I've seen other cases very similar to this, but even most burn victims that I see from car fires or house fires are not burned to the extent that these individual dental fragments were burned. They're right up there at the top of the list as far as the worst I've seen.
Still, Dr. Simley was able to use dental records to identify those tooth fragments as Teresa Hallbach's.
Doctor, the opinion that the fragments from tooth 31 are very consistent with the dental x-rays that you obtained from Teresa Hallbach displaying tooth 31. Do you hold that opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes, sir, I do.
After the victim was identified as Teresa Hallbach, the state called her mother Karen.
Tell the jury about your relationship with Teresa and how often would you talk to her?
At least once a week, and she'd come over a lot on the weekends to spend time with us and her two sisters. She took pictures for us. She did our family picture, and she was always taking pictures of the girls and around the farm. She liked to take pictures a lot. And we'd spend a lot of time together. We'd go out to eat, or it seems like the kids were always over on a Sunday afternoon. And then we'd talk, sit around the island in our kitchen and talk a lot. We did spend a lot of time together.
Was Sundays a day that the family would typically get together?
Yeah. Yes.
In fact, the Sunday before Teresa's death, the one day before her death, 30th of October, do you recall all getting together for a birthday party that day?
Yes, it was my father's birthday on Halloween, but we got together that Sunday before and celebrated his birthday at his house.
All right. So Teresa was actually killed on your dad's birthday.
Yes.
And Karen talked about Teresa's relationship with her younger sisters.
Teresa was very close to both her sisters. They spent a lot of time laughing, picking on each other. It kind of became tradition. Teresa would come over Sunday night, and their three favorite TV shows were on that night, and they'd watch it together and laugh and have a good time.
The state also focused its investigation on cell phone records that showed someone checked Teresa's voicemail several days after she disappeared.
There's been at least some suggestion that on perhaps the 2nd or 3rd of November that your daughter Teresa may still have been alive, may have been accessing her cell phone. After the 31st of October, Mrs. Hallbach, did you ever hear your daughter Teresa's voice again?
No, I did not.
Is Teresa, or was Teresa, the kind of girl that would have taken off or would have left or would have vanished without talking to you or talking to her family?
No, she would not.
In all, Mrs. Hallbach was on the stand for less than 15 minutes, and the defense declined to cross-examine her. After the lunch break, the state again focused on the bone fragments investigators found in Avery's burn pit. Forensic anthropologist Leslie Eisenberg testified that her analysis of skull fragments concluded that the victim suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the back of the head.
The opinion that the internal beveling observed in the left parietal bone is characteristic of a gunshot or bullet entrance wound. Do you hold that opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes, sir, I do.
Recapping Day 13 of the Stephen Avery trial, Dan O'Donnell, News Radio 620 WTMJ.